It's the principle of substitution. A few things that I would write down next to the principle of substitution here real quick. A few things that I would write next to substitution. For the first thing I would write are the words, no prudent person would pay more. The principle of substitution says no prudent person would pay more. And of course, a prudent person is like a reasonable or rational person, right? No responsible person would pay any more. That's the first thing I would write. The second thing that I would write, right next to that, I would write the words basis of sales comparison approach. The principle of substitution is the basis of the sales comparison approach to appraisal. We'll talk about that in about 5 minutes, but I would make a note of this. The principle of substitution is the basis of the sales comparison approach. Now, how this might work is, let's say that you wanted to find out how much your house is worth. So you look at what people are getting for other houses in your neighborhood. And based on your research, you notice that everybody is getting about $100,000 for their homes. How much is your house worth? $100,000, right? You don't really need a whole lot more research. You know that your house is going to be worth about $100,000. But here's the thing. Those houses that you are looking at, right, the three comparables that you're looking at, are any of those properties your house? No, none of them are your house, right? These are all other properties. But somehow you're using what other properties have sold for to form a basis for what you could get for your property. This concept of extrapolating what properties around you have sold for to determine the value of your home is called substitution. The appraisal principle of substitution says that you could substitute what people are getting for their homes, and based on their property sales prices, you can determine the value of your property. Now, of course, these properties have to be similar in size, desirability, etc., and location in order to count as reliable comparables. But I would note that about the principle of substitution. The principle of substitution says for two things. The first thing is no prudent person would pay more. Would anybody pay $300,000 for this house where all the other houses are $100,000? Nobody's going to do that. First of all, even if this house was really big, it would still suffer from regression, right? Remember that? Regression. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, no prudent person would pay more, number one. Number two, the sales comparison or market data approach won't allow this property to be appraised for any more than about what other properties are selling for. It's like sometimes you'll be with a client, a seller, where you're trying to take a listing on their home, and the seller will ask that you list the property at, let's say, $800,000. Now, your data might suggest a price of $720,000, but they want $800,000 for whatever reason. Even if you could find someone dumb enough to pay $800,000 for that property, that buyer is still most likely going to need to get a loan. And the person making the loan to the buyer is going to require an appraisal. So that appraisal, the appraiser isn't going to appraise the property probably for any more than what you initially thought, which is $720,000. So just keep this in mind about the principle of substitution. Now, let's just do a quick review here about some of these concepts, right? And then any questions you have, of course. The basis of the market data approach is the principle of substitution, right? Substitution. This is the basis for the market data or sales comparison approach to appraisal. How do you figure this out? You look at what other properties are selling for that are similar in size, value, and desirability, and based on what you're getting for those properties, that'll determine the value of your property. That's the principle of substitution. Any questions about anything?